Hello, Nate.
Hello, Greg. Hello, everybody out there on the internet. We did it. We did it on the first try, Greg. We got on
Uh,
all the internet feeds the first time. Welcome,
that may
folks,
be a
to
first
What's
for
This
us.
Bird? I know it's been a while. Welcome, folks, to What's This Bird Live, the ABA's bi-weekly question mark look at birding and birding bird watching tips. We're excited to talk to
yeah,
you here today.
that's my fault. I got COVID right after the first of
That
the
is
year,
COVID's fault, Greg.
and I was out for 10 days. Otherwise, we would have been here on the third.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're here now. We're happy to be with you for the first What's the Bird episode in 2025.
Yeah,
Happy New Year list to all of you who are celebrating. We're excited to talk to you. A little bit of a background on what we do here today. If you're new, we still have a few new people showing up from time to time. The American Birding Association is a bird and bird watching advocacy organization. We host a number of groups on Facebook to communicate with the birding public. One of those is called What's This Bird? And it is a community where people can take photos, videos, recordings, descriptions, all that stuff of birds that they see out in their daily lives, out in their regular birding, and if they can post them up there, and our friendly community will help you identify those birds. Every once in a while, we have a few birds that we like to talk about in a little bit more detail, and that's what Greg and I are planning on doing here today. We're here to talk about a few bird photos that have popped up on What's This Bird in the What's This Bird group over the last few days, and we're going to kind of talk through them. Hopefully, they are birds that you will encounter regularly in your birding, and yeah, we're excited to get to it. Back on the horse, as it were.
absolutely. And also one of the things we do here is Nate is watching the comments in YouTube, and I'm watching the comments
Oh
in
yeah,
Facebook.
there's that
So
stuff.
if you've got something to say, you've got questions, something you want to bring up, just chime in the comments. We're watching it, and we will get to it if we can, and we will try hard.
We'll do the best we
Usually-
can. We're watching there. We
Look,
got a lot of people. We
Mia's
got
here.
people on
Hi,
Facebook.
Mia. Good to see you. And Gavin.
Yeah, Gavin's there. We got folks on YouTube. Hello to Marsha Balestri from Maryland, Nolan from Illinois, Elizabeth Elton, Andrew Cambauer, Buddy Campbell from Beaufort, South Carolina. That's Beaufort, not Beaufort, South Carolina. And anyone else, Birding AP Benson. The thing about YouTube is people just have their handles and they don't always have their names. So I don't really know who I'm talking to. So if I call you out by your handle, hello to you as well. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. We're going to talk birds and birding. And of course, um, we are here to chat with you. Oh, you
Yes,
turn
thank
my
you,
audio
Mia.
up. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
got you, Greg.
Yeah, I was knocked out for 10 days, and it hit me hard. Um, you been out birding at all, Nate? I obviously have not.
Here and there. It's been pretty cold and snowy and nasty here. I mean, snowy relatively speaking. Here in the southeast, when we get an inch and a half of snow, they don't really treat the roads for it, so it ends up shutting everything down for a few days, and that's sort of what my week has been. There's a lesser blackback gull up at a lake nearby. That would be a county bird for me, so I'm kind of thinking
Nice.
about going out and checking that out this weekend, maybe, or maybe early next week. Looks like it's been there for a while. Yeah, so yeah, not a lot. I feel bad. My birding list. I Most of my birding has been when I take the dog out to the backyard and I stand there and see what birds are hanging around while I wait for it to do its business. And
Yeah,
brown-headed nuthatches in my backyard, which makes it a little more exciting than
oh,
maybe
that's
others.
cool. My
Yeah,
my year list stands at like 5.
terrible. We're terrible. Do as we say, not as we do, folks. Please
Absolutely.
enjoy your birding. Um,
Well, yeah, we're all about to get hit with a lot of cold and snow next week.
it looks like it.
It's going to be interesting. We
Yeah,
haven't
they're
had a good
predicting
cold snap like this in quite a while.
multiple inches down here. Yeah, I love the cold snap. I know some people don't like it, but what it means down here in the southeast is when it gets really, really cold in the Great Lakes, all those birds that spend the winter on the Great Lakes, when those lakes freeze up for the most part, start heading south. They're, what's the term? Facultative migrants that kind of move about as far
Correct.
south as they need to. And what that means is that a lot of birds that we end up seeing are, I don't know, like scoters and grebes and things that are sort of unusual inland.
Maybe a long-tailed duck
Where
in
I
there.
live. Yeah, long-tailed duck. I've had long-tailed duck on our lakes and things like that. Maybe some interesting gulls. That's the time to look for it because they'll come about as far south as they need to find some open water. And I don't know if they're going to find it here next week, even as far south as I am.
Yeah.
It's gonna get
Well, I
pretty
mean,
cold, but
one of the neat things around Chicago is the canal system, and so there's shipping canals and wastewater canals and so on,
oh,
and
there's open.
or
Yeah.
water, whatever they call them. But there's the water reclamation plants are on the canals, and they pump warm water into the canal, and so there's a
People might
stretch of
spring.
the canal that's open no matter how cold it gets.
Yeah.
And all the ducks that are out, like the scoters and things, they flock into these canals and the Calumet River where there's open water, and you can get much closer to them than you could ever
That's always
get.
nice.
You know,
Yeah, they're nice looking ducks, and it's always a kind of a treat to be able to see them up close because I don't know what your experiences are with scoters, but for me they're typically black specks out on the distant horizon at the beach or
well,
flying by
exactly,
in big flocks. Yeah,
exactly. And then they get into the canal, and the furthest they can get away from you is across the canal, which is like 50 yards.
yeah,
and,
that's
and
good
so
stuff.
that's pretty awesome. Hi Len, hi Drive on Facebook. Yeah, we've got we've got some fun birds to talk about today. Mia says that there's snow in Arkansas. Yeah, I've seen videos of what happens when there's snow in the deep south.
We don't have the machinery to
Oh, I
get rid of
know.
it.
Oh,
It
I
just
know. But
kinda
also, I mean,
stays there until it
people who
melts.
have never driven on snow or walked on snow, or ice, it's like, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Growing
I
growing
my
up in
kids were home
Chicago
from
is just a
school
way
this
of
summer.
life.
Yeah, yeah. We got you got snow plows.
Oh, I saw this.
All
I
right.
saw some video where somebody attached a dumpster laying on its side to the front of a truck as a snowplow.
Yeah, you'd think that some people down here some good old boys down in the south might MacGyver their way to clearing some of the roads, but
Ah,
maybe not.
my
where I
brother
live.
Jake is in there. Hey, Jake, good to see you. So,
Vladimir Velasquez from Manizales, one of my favorite places on earth.
nice. So before we
So
get
Lee from
into the
Newfoundland.
birds, I just want to point out this week's podcast on what I think is the best of the natural history podcasts out there, the American Birding
We're no
Podcast,
Bigfoot
with
pod, but
your
we're doing all
host
right.
Nathan Swick right here.
Hello.
One of my favorite themes that you do is the take it or leave it, and this
People
week
like the
you
take
were
it or
joined by ABA board member, ABA board chair Chris Sloan and Martha Harbison. So what'd you get into?
Yeah, both very opinionated birders. The conceit of the take it or leave it is that we have, birders have opinions. We
Sure.
love to talk.
No, I've never
We
met
love to talk.
I've never met a not opinionated birder.
And so what we do is we take some of the hottest opinions we can find, and we basically take it or leave it. You agree or disagree with the opinion, and it's a great conceit to have some cool discussions about birds and birding. We talked a lot about. We talked about what did we talk? We talked about beginning birders with cameras. We talked about the balkanization of rarity, reporting apps and how to solve that. We talked about whether Canada is underappreciated as a birding nation. Really good stuff that we talked. The take it or leave it is always a fun way to kind of talk about these questions. Sometimes I can't get birders to ask questions of me, so we
Right.
can't really have like a Q&A style. But everyone's got opinions that they're willing to
Right.
share. And so we sort of discuss them that way. Chris and Martha, both very opinionated birders, both very smart birders, and so they come off really well there. Fun stuff. Yeah, Marsha Balestri says the podcast was good this week. I appreciate that, Marsha.
And it
People love-
was.
People love take it or leave it.
Yeah, so get on over to aba.org/podcast or get it on however you listen to your podcasts and give it a listen. I think you will be happy. Okay,
Gavin asked,
let's-
are we still doing the rarity rundown on the podcast? Yes, I am scheduling that this week. Hopefully, it will be out in early February.
Oh, one last thing before getting into the birds here. Minnesota's having the biggest owl year in
That's what I've
a
heard.
decade or more. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, to the point that
Uh,
eBird now has sensitized boreal owl
wow. Yeah.
in
My
the
friend
state.
Jody Allaire, a Canadian birder from Alberta, messaged me the other day and said that they're having, yeah, as you'd expect, just a little ways up the road. Also a huge owl year. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
and our buddy Huggins, Steve Huggins, is up there birding right now and having just the time of his life and getting all kinds of stuff and generally annoying people. But the Minnesotans are nice; they'll deal with it. Um, okay, Long Island, New York. This one, I learned something on this one.
We have a bird flying over water here, Greg. It looks like a pretty open body of water, no shade or
Yeah,
anything. So I imagine it's pretty sizable here. A lot of glare.
yeah,
But yeah, this looks to me like a duck. I think we can safely say that it's not a loon. It's not long bodied with long, legs sticking out the back or a
right.
long bill. It's not a grebe, and that it doesn't really have kind of a long neck. Grebes are kind of necky.
Yeah.
Um,
And
this
they
looks like
also
one
have
of
the
our
legs sticking out the back, the feet sticking
exact.
out the
Oh yeah,
back.
always. Yeah, for sure. This is one of our small ducks. Stub faced, small head, reasonably large tail. Dark. Not a lot to go on this bird, but I feel pretty
The-
safe saying this is a duck and not a grebe or loon or
oh,
any
I
other
agree.
water bird you'd expect.
I agree. And the tail, so like I saw two things. Like, we talk a lot about birding by impression, gestalt. Um, and, when you bird that way as a matter of habit, as I think most
Hmm.
birders who've been doing it for a long time do, um, you see a bird and you're like, oh, that's a boom. And then sometimes you look at it again, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait. And so when I
Yeah,
saw
birding from
this,
single photos is good for that because
it
in the
is.
field it's one thing, and then you get a single photo and your gut says one thing, and then you have to kind of take a step back and start looking at things a little more carefully. And this,
Yeah.
as you
So
say,
when
Greg,
I
this is
when
like
I
that.
looked at this bird, my snap judgment was that's a wood duck.
Yeah,
A,
mine too,
because of the
actually.
tail
Hmm.
and kind of the steep, what appears to be a steep forehead.
Yeah,
And just
wood duck
based
is
on
a
shape, I'm like, that looks like a wood duck.
yeah wood
Um,
duck, small bodied duck with a relatively
yep.
kind of compact, squarish head, shortish wings, dark, frequently very dark when it
Oh,
flies
yeah.
by.
Female, very
Um,
dark.
And with a big long tail. Like the tail is sort
Yes.
of the defining characteristic of a wood duck. It's the one thing that a wood duck profile always shows. They're a long-tailed duck. They're a tree duck.
Yeah.
So you
And,
need that
and,
tail to
and,
kind of move through the trees a little bit to help steer.
yeah. So then we started looking closer at this bird, and the white wing patches, which are quite evident, like that doesn't fit. So
Hmm.
the person who posted it thought it might be a white winged scoter,
Hmm.
uh, and it's not. White winged scoter is a much heavier bird. It's
Yeah,
it's got it's got more head. It's got practically no tail.
thicker neck. Yeah.
It's just a thicker bird all around, and it's got a much bigger wing patch. And a wood duck does not have a wing patch at all. It's got a trailing white edge that in this kind of a backlit photo might not even show up against the
Hmm.
water. Um, but I learned that buffleheads have long tails, which I just never. It,
I
it
don't think
never
of them
occurred to
that
me
way.
because I always
Yeah.
think of them as like being bumblebees buzzing over the water.
That's exactly right. But it does make sense. Bufflehead, in addition, like wood duck, is also a tree nesting
It
duck.
is.
So
It
this is a
is.
bird that needs to kind of, you know, steer a little bit better than say a mallard or a gadwall or something of that ilk, or even like other diving ducks like scaup and canvasback and redhead and whatnot. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
But
if you
that
think of
little
the tail as an air brake, then yeah, bufflehead needs a brake if it's flying into tree cavities.
and that white wing patch that's like the first four or five inner secondaries,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah, you can see
total
those. Yeah.
bufflehead that gets it. But I really didn't realize how much of a tail a bufflehead has until this picture, and I love it when I can learn something from what's this bird.
Yeah, for sure. I think a bufflehead. I guess I need to see bufflehead more in flight. It's not a duck that I see flying around all that often, especially not compared to wood duck, which you're constantly spooking off like branches or
Right.
in a waterfowl impoundment, or like a wooded impoundment or something. At least down here in the southeast, we get a lot of those. Bufflehead, when I encounter them, a lot of times on those little tiny ponds, they do like a small pond. Um, they stay put or they dive to get out of
Right.
danger. So if they're close to one side of the pond and you come up on it, they'll all kind of dive together and then they'll resurface on the opposite side of the pond. They don't tend
Exactly.
to spook and fly like a wood duck does all the time. Wood duck's a bit of a scaredy duck. So
Precisely.
I need to see more bufflehead in the
And
air. Although I will say this is sort of single photo issue, and that if I saw this bird in the field, I feel like I might be able to get it right because the lighting is quite poor in this photo, and I think that's sort
yeah,
of contributing to our confusion here. But yeah,
I mean,
you know better what you see a lot of. Yeah.
if you look really closely and use your imagination a little bit, you can kind of see the white face patch on the blurry image on the upper
Mm-hmm.
left there. Um, but yeah, I mean, what you're saying
Yeah.
about seeing
Yeah.
buffleheads in
I can
flight,
talk myself into that. Yeah.
when I see that, yeah, exactly. When I see them, they're usually in flight. They're usually out on Lake Michigan
Mm-hmm.
among scaup or scoters.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yep.
and as you're
Absolutely.
looking at the flock, the first thing your brain does is discount the bufflehead because you're looking for other things
It's
in the
tiny.
flock,
Yeah.
and you're not really paying attention to the buffleheads. Um, so yeah, this
Yeah.
is a little lesson for me.
Coleman Gross has a question. Can you comment on the bend on the wrist? Yeah, so we can see compared to the birds in the composite here, the bird in our photo does have that bent wrist. I see that as sort of like just a moment in time, sort of mid
Yes,
flap. So two things going on. The bird is going to flex the wrist a little bit as it flaps, and so if the camera captures that moment, it's going to look a little bit weird compared to these other photos in the composite where the flap is sort of reaching forward. It's in that kind of forward thrust,
yes,
pushing back motion here, whereas this was sort of the back end of that. And also, if I'm imagining a duck kind of coming in on the water and kind of setting its wings to land. I don't know if you ever noticed this, like a group of even like mallards or pintails or gadwall or whatever, any sort of duck does that. As they're coming in to land on a body of water, they'll all kind of set their wings in sort of like an arc, and so it's
just
kind
like
of
this.
bent a little bit. It's just like this, and so I think this is a bird that is coming in maybe in like less than a second. It's going to hit the water and
Right.
and be on the water as opposed to being in
I
the
mean,
air.
I'll
So I
bet
think
I'll
that's sort
bet
of
in
why
a
it
video,
flinches that way.
if this were a frame from a video, in the next second or two, the feet would be coming down and the head would be coming up
Exactly.
more. Because they do
Yeah,
that
skimming water
as they
skim
come
to
in.
a stop. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I know. My grandfather was a duck hunter, and he always used to talk about that moment when the ducks kind of set their wings is the moment when you shoot, because that's when they're least able to kind of
Yeah,
they're going slow. They can't change direction quickly. That's when you pop up. But that's what's going on in this bird. It's coming down for a landing and
yeah.
setting its wings, as it were.
And that the head up like that also fits that as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
And think about it, the tail, because when they're coming down for a landing, they spread the tail too,
Flare
and
it. Yeah.
all of that fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one moment in time that is kind of giving a confusing impression of this bird.
Now we're gonna go to Florida, and we got a little theme of hawks today, I think. Not for any
Hawk
reason,
season.
just that's what seemed interesting and what's this bird during the time that I looked.
Yeah,
We've
a lot of
got
bare branches out right now, so a lot of people are noticing hawks.
Yeah, this is a pretty standard shaped buteo.
Hmm.
It looks to have some kind of face pattern. I mean, the obvious thing that stands out right away is the clean white belly.
Yeah, very cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and that kind of, this is a good photo, so we can see that it really is clean. And
Yeah.
the birds that it would be confused with would only be confused if you weren't getting such a good look. And
Yeah,
and it was
so
high
yeah,
up,
it's
or
small buteo is the first thing that pops to mind. Buteo or
compact.
soaring hawks. Yeah. broadish wings, shorter tail. Of the birds that you would expect to see in Florida this time of year, I mean, there could be a lot of them. There's a lot of kind of weird
Yeah.
overwintering beautios that spend time in Florida. Like there's a population of Swainson's hawks that will hang out in Florida,
Yep.
and also red tail classic ones like red tailed, red shouldered. Broad-winged hawk is mostly gone from the North America, or
Yeah.
I should say the ABA area this time of year, but Florida does have a few
Yeah. If you're going
overwintering
to see one
broad-winged
in the
hawks.
winter, it's going to be in Florida.
Yeah, very few of those hawks have this sort of combination of kind of shortish, paddly wings and very clean underparts. Though when I
Yeah.
think of Swainson's hawk, very distinctive profile, long wings, kind of
Long
big.
wings.
That dip right where the primaries and the secondaries meet. It's kind of narrow through the primaries and then it kind of flares a little bit in the secondaries. It's got a very
Hmm.
distinctive wing shape. Um, Red-tailed hawk is kind of those board plank flat wings, very
Well,
very
let's
broad
take a
all the
look
way
at
to the
those
tip.
then.
Yeah, let's look at a few. I know you've probably created something there. Yeah.
So
Why
I
am
mean,
I describing them when I know you?
if we look at the comp, I think it's pretty obvious right away that this is a short-tailed hawk. And I mean, the two things that really just give it away in this plumage, it does have a dark phase, are the amount of dark in the secondaries and primaries, the amount of blackish coloration, and the just clean, stark white underparts,
Yeah,
and the finely
especially the
banded
clean
tail.
parts.
The bird that short-tailed hawk is most confused with, and the reason it sneaks past when it does vagrate extremely rarely in the north is because it can be quite difficult to tell from broad-winged hawks. Because
similar
I mean,
shape.
even though broad-winged is patterned underneath at heights that can just disappear and they can look very white underneath, but their wing linings can look very white also.
Yeah, for
But
sure. The thing that I think about when I see broad-winged hawks soaring, and this is whether they are juvenile birds or adult birds, is that pattern of the wing where it looks like it is just bordered by a very thin, like someone took a Sharpie, and just
right,
kind of drew the wing around the edges, and it's very thin but very dark. And so when you see a broad-winged hawk soaring, I mean that stuff just stands out to me, even if I'm driving down the highway at 80 miles an hour and I see a hawk fly over and I look up and it's got that wing. It's broad wing.
yeah,
Short-tailed
and
sort of has that. It's got a very similar wing profile, but that black is just so much thicker. It's like someone took a thicker Sharpie and drew around it, like
yes,
one of those big, thick, broad-tipped ones.
and the
Obviously
wing is
yeah, very
and the
clean.
wing shape is different. It's
A little
subtle,
bit, yeah,
but
yeah,
it has longer wings.
broader at the tip. Yeah,
The wings aren't as paddle shaped as broad winged, usually. But yeah, the amount of black in the primaries and secondaries is key in this adult broad wing or short tailed hawk. Sorry. Looking over at red shouldered. Red shouldered has again can look really pale underneath and all
especially
over,
Florida birds.
especially Florida birds. But by comparison, it's got really different flying style and wing shape. I always think of red-shouldered hawks as pushing their wings forward like hands, and it almost looks like they're reaching forward.
Yeah.
And the way when they're soaring, and the way the fingers, the primaries kind of splay, and of course they've got the white patches in the outer primaries,
Right, you
or
can see
in the
those
primaries,
colors.
I should
Yeah,
say.
parentheses.
Yeah. And then I included red-tailed hawk here because red tails can be extremely pale underneath and really quite similar in pattern to a short-tailed hawk. But you'll notice the dark patagial marks on either side of the bird's head on the forward edge of the wing.
Yeah.
That red tails,
To the forearm.
yeah, red tails virtually always have that,
Epaulets.
no matter
Yeah.
what, unless they're dark phase, and the whole wing is dark. But
wing is-
otherwise,
You're confused with another species there. Yeah,
Exactly.
short-tailed hawk is a really interesting bird, in that I don't know that a lot of birders outside of Florida get to encounter it very often at all. Even birders in Florida don't always get to encounter it. It's
Yeah.
present, but in relatively low numbers compared to some of the other similar hawks that you might see. Broad-winged hawk, yeah, I love that wing looks so different, especially compared to red-shouldered. I mean, I talk a lot about red-shouldered versus broad-winged as being a confusion species, and it can be. But when they're in flight, they just don't look the same to me. The red shoulder's got a much more red taily sort of look to it, sort of a broader wing, whereas
Yeah.
broadwing, the card suit spades, it looks
Yeah.
like a spade, like the symbol on a card, kind of broad at the base, and then kind of comes to a point rather abruptly.
Mm-hmm.
People call it paddle shaped. That's all a good description too. But when they say broad wing, that's sort of what they're talking about. It really does have that kind of broad wing coming out of the body that narrows very quickly, to make that kind of pointy wing shape. And it's a
Yep.
bird hunting hawk, so it's kind of, you expect it to almost have falcony wings.
And
Not as
it's a forest
not
it's
as
a
extreme as
forest
a
hawk.
falcon,
They
but
take
pretty
snakes and
yeah.
insects. I mean,
Mhm.
they're but it's interesting at hawk watches, when there's a lot of broad wings moving, you're always looking for red shoulders.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you're like, oh, is that a red shoulder? And then when a red shoulder comes over, like, oh, geez, how could I ever confuse that?
Yeah.
They really are.
Short tail
They
is
are
interesting. We were
different.
talking about hawk watches. You know, um, I think short tailed is probably under counted in a lot of these places. I mean, we think of it as a Florida specialty, and it truly, well, in Arizona as well,
Yeah.
increasingly in the last couple of decades. But it's got a weird pattern of vagrancy. Like there are records for Upper Midwest
Oh, yeah.
short tailed hawks. Does Illinois have a record? I want to say
It
it's either
depends.
Illinois or one of the
I
one of the
think
upper Midwest states has a record. I don't recall.
Michigan does, I
Michigan, I think,
believe,
does definitely.
and
Yeah,
Wisconsin
that's
might.
maybe
I'm
that's what
not
they do.
sure.
Yeah.
But there was a bird that was seen at one of the Illinois hawk watches on Lake Michigan that
Hmm.
the people who saw it, and one very experienced hawk watcher was absolutely, well, 99% sure it was a short tail, but it was just one of
Hmm.
those birds that was so far away and didn't
Yeah.
get closer that just couldn't get it 100%. But
Yeah.
I'll bet we get one
That's
at
still
some
a bird
point.
I've not seen in Florida. I've seen it in the neotron. It's a widespread buteo, small
Yeah.
buteo throughout the Mesoamerica into northern into South America, and it's you encounter them regularly down there, and they're just a regular one of the more common soaring hawks. But not seen it in Florida. I never always there at the wrong time of year.
Yeah,
They're
I've
kind of
been to
scarce in
Florida a
winter.
few times, and I've seen a few of them, but all quite a while ago, and all around the Everglades. And there was one day
Yeah.
that we got very lucky, and I saw like four of them in both light and
Mhm.
dark phases in one day.
That's cool.
And that was really something.
Yeah, I've seen the dark phases in was it Honduras and they're in Costa Rica too. Yeah, neat bird.
Another hawk. We're going to Wyoming
Speaking
now.
of raptors, Wyoming. Yeah, so you look at this thing, roadside hawk sitting on top of a telephone pole. You're driving by it, well, Wyoming, I guess probably close to 90 miles an hour. What do you imagine that this one is? There's a lot of big winter prairie raptors around. Ferruginous hawk. What else? Red-tailed hawk. What are some peregrine falcon, kestrel, merlin? A lot of options
Yeah,
going on
prairie
here. The thing
falcon,
that really stands out to me in this bird is just
falcon.
how deer falcon. Yeah, why not?
Why
We're
not?
dreaming. It's just how pale it is. Um,
It is.
kind of sandy brown all over, and really, really long wings. Like those wings come to a point right at the tip of the tail.
Yeah.
So this is a long winged raptor, little tiny bill, big round head. It says
Well,
falcon to me, Greg.
yes, the little round or square head with the little bill, and the long attenuated shape, that all says falcon to me. And what's interesting about this bird is that, and I couldn't find it quickly to throw it in here, and I just couldn't make it fit. But a group of friends and we have a private chat where we talk about birds and stuff, and there was a picture of a falcon that looked just like this, in the same pose, practically the same lighting and everything, in southern Illinois. And there was a debate going on whether it was a merlin or a prairie falcon, which would be a very good bird. And this bird showed up in What's This Bird on the same day, or
Mhm.
maybe the next morning or whatever. Um, but almost exactly the same pose, lighting, everything. Uh, and really, when you look at it closely, you've got the little mustache, you've got the eyebrow.
Mhm.
Um, or take a look at the falcons, we can see really that this bird is a prairie falcon, but Merlin is can be surprisingly similar. And
Yeah,
when you
with no size,
exactly,
way to context to contextualize the bird, they can look really. Merlin obviously a much smaller bird than a prairie falcon, which is just shy of the size of a peregrine falcon. So it's a
right,
good size raptor. Merlin rather small, more kestrel size, but proportionally they look rather similar. They're both kind of big headed. They're both very shouldery. They both got the long wings that reach almost to the tip of the tail. Not kestrel, which you didn't put on here, but female
no,
kestrel can sort of look this way too. But they tend to be very lanky, long necked, long tailed. They don't have that kind of bull-headed, shouldery look that the bigger falcons have.
exactly.
That
and
Merlin have that where it shares with peregrine and prairie falcon too.
and the prairie falcon, one of the field marks that you'll see in the guides is the dark wing pits,
Mm-hmm.
the axillars,
In
which
flight for sure. Yep.
in flight, but it spreads into the side of the breast, which we can see on the
Mm-hmm.
two examples on
Yeah.
the left. And Merlin can have, in certain plumages, can look really similar.
Yeah.
And the tail shape. One of my friends, Adam Sell, who was a professional hawk watcher for a while, pointed out the difference in the tail shape. And
Mm-hmm.
the Merlin has a more kestrel-like tail, longer,
For sure.
squarer
Yeah.
tip. And the prairie falcon has a shorter, more attenuated tail with longer
Yeah.
wings, and just gives it an overall different shape
Mm-hmm.
than the Merlin. And peregrine is even yet a bulkier bird, but you know, peregrine, Merlin, gyrfalcon are all extremely variable.
Mm-hmm.
Prairie falcon really is not.
Pretty much the same.
I mean,
Wherever you
prairie
see it,
falcons
whenever you
just
see it.
always
Yep.
look like those two
Sandy
birds on the
brown.
left.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Sarah Coffey has a question. How common in the area heading that direction mid-April? That would be cool. In Wyoming, pretty common. I
Yeah,
think
I
prairie falcon is not an uncommon bird to encounter on the roadside
no.
in Wyoming. In the flat lowlands, the dry, high prairie in
Yeah,
Wyoming and Colorado and Montana and that whole Idaho. Prairie falcon to me is like one of the iconic birds of the American West, and I don't know, honestly, one of the coolest birds we have in North America.
I
Easy.
agree. And just
Yeah.
just fast as all get out. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. But
Merlin and
they
prairie
don't have that
falcon.
sort
I
of
think
intensity that peregrines do. Like they're kind of more,
no.
I don't know, they feel kind of more lazy. Peregrine falcons are like all full of anxiety and rage. Prairie falcons just seem like kind of lazier and cooler and chiller.
I think
Yeah.
parakeets are just they're just murder parakeets that are just having a
Yeah.
good day. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not to say like Merlin. Merlin is the just aggro falcon. There's not a bird that a Merlin will not go and antagonize given the opportunity. So
That's
eat or
exactly right.
antagonize. Those are the two options for Merlin.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and just to finish up that thought, peregrine, it never really shows that sort of blotch on the side the way that Merlin and
Mm-hmm.
prairie falcon can. They're usually either barred, clean, streaked, whatever, but it's never blotchy like that.
Yeah.
And with a sort of a clean breast and a blotch on the side.
They love sitting
So
on these power poles like that, Sarah. If you're just driving through Wyoming, like these sort of wooden power poles or wooden fence posts. I don't think I've ever seen a peregrine falcon that wasn't on a power pole or a fence
maybe a
post. Come to
prairie.
think of it, a prairie, yeah, a prairie
Yeah.
falcon that wasn't on a fence post or a power pole.
Yeah, I mean the prairie falcons that I've seen, if it's not on a post or a pole, it's flying at Mach 7, 4 feet off the ground.
Yeah, yeah, prairie falcon, great bird.
Okay, gonna go to the Texas coast.
Aransas, the upper Texas coast. Um, yeah, so streaky little brownish bird with a relatively short, thick, conical bill, long
Yep,
tail. Definitely a New World sparrow,
or a
Greg.
bunting, or one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the long tail would sort of rule out things like lark bunting and
Yep.
finches. So sparrow seems like a pretty big bet. Strong legs, strong feet, all over kind of roundish. We do like to break our sparrows up into genera for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, but that's hard to do for this one because we're looking at the back and not at the breast because like clean versus streak breast or the stick pin is a nice way to do that. But
Yeah.
it's like a relatively large-bodied, large-headed sparrow with some interesting patterns on the
I
face.
think the wing bars and the long tail and the big pink
Yeah,
legs kind of get me over into the Zonos.
yeah, for sure. Zonos, are bigger, deep-bodied sparrows. I would think that we got four in North America. Three of the four would be reasonable possibilities in Aransas, although we are getting toward the southern end of white-throated sparrow. They're actually quite rare in South Texas.
Yeah.
So
And
what do we got?
white-throated
Harris's.
sparrow really never has a plain face like this.
Yeah, they've always got something going on.
And
Harris's
and same thing
sparrow,
and same thing
sort
with
of out of
same
range
thing
for
with
that too.
Harris's.
Yeah,
It
actually,
never
come to think
has
of
a
it, none of them would be super common at Aransas National Wildlife Refuge.
right.
Yeah.
But I think we can get down to a couple of birds here pretty quickly, and that would be white crown sparrow, which
Mhm.
is very widespread. And
Cross
I think
the
if you are
continents.
going to see one of these birds in South Texas, I look at the range map real quick. Let's see, white crowned. Oh yeah, white crown gets down there quite a
Yeah,
bit,
that's probably be the most likely of the
and
four.
white throated too.
Yeah, although it's as I said, it's getting towards the southern edge of white-throated winter range. I recall
Mm-hmm.
that being a very good bird whenever I was at the Lower Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival. They'd always get very excited about white-throated sparrow in the valley. And yeah, I guess Aransas
Yeah,
is
it's. I mean,
a fair
at
bit
least
north of
looking
the
at
valley, but
Sibley's map,
close
yeah,
enough.
they come right down to about the middle of the Texas coast and
Texas
then
coast.
stop.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um, Golden crowned. It's pretty much a Pacific species. Winters across Southern California. It's not really a desert species. I think the desert kind of holds it. There are records in the east,
mm-hmm.
but for the most part, it's pretty much limited to the immediate, not the immediate coast, but not too far off.
But
But that's got to be an option for this bird too, because it does look like it's got a crown here and an eye line, though it does is pale between the eye and the bill, so it's got a pale lore. But
yep,
it does have looks like some sort of crown and an eye line there, streaky back. So I would suggest that this is probably a younger bird. So this is probably its first winter,
yeah.
um, and pinkish legs,
Well, yeah, and
pale
that's
bill,
something
kind of
too, is that we
yellowish.
can
Yeah.
we can see the pink legs very, very
Hmm.
clearly, which leads me to believe that the bill color is accurate, even though it's
Hmm.
harshly backlit. Um, the color that we're seeing there is accurate, and the color in the face, it's got that plain face with, as you said, the pale lores, and really there's not a whole lot of pattern there in the dark bill.
Hmm.
We put that all together, and I this is a golden crowned sparrow, and if you look at white crowned, it's always got more of a face pattern. Um, but notice on our bird on the left here, the sort of very finely checkered pattern on the nape.
Hmm.
And white crown just doesn't have that, and golden crown does, and that's I that's a fairly solid field
We
mark.
might disagree on this one, Greg. I'm inclined to sort of go with White Crown, mostly because I didn't really consider Golden Crown for this bird, and that's probably my fault. And maybe we should have discussed that more before we came on.
That's
Um,
fine.
so the thing that says White Crown to me, at least, is the fact that the eye line kind of goes beyond the back of the eye.
Mm.
It's got a little bit more going on in the face than I would think a golden crown. That's not to say that I wouldn't be convinced that it could be a golden crown, but that does bother me a little bit for the for a golden crown.
Yeah, the things
The
that
look of
stick out, the things that stick out for me in favor of Golden Crown is just how plain the face is, as you
no,
said.
I agree with that.
The just all around, and how undefined the dark cap is. The dark bill, white crown sparrows have pretty noticeable pink bills.
Hmm.
And then, as I said, that very fine checkered, almost vermiculated pattern on the nape, which white crown just really doesn't have. And
Sorry,
and the darker back pattern too. Although
no, I agree with
that
that.
can
When
be
I think,
subjective.
I mean, these are really similar birds. It should be said, golden crown and white crown sparrow. Golden
Yeah.
crown, typically things tend to be darker in the Pacific coast, and golden crown is sort of that version of white crown sparrow.
Hmm.
In a lot of plumages, especially in these sort of younger juvenile plumages, it does present as sort of a more brown, I don't know, khaki or khaki gray kind of version of
Hmm.
white crown sparrow. And to be fair, I don't have a ton of experience with um, golden crown sparrow. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The bill looks yellow to me. I'm gonna say the bill looks kind of yellow to me though. I don't see the
Well,
dark bill.
it doesn't look pink though. I mean, the
No, I
upper
agree
the
with
upper
that.
mandible is dark. There may be some yellow or something on the lower mandible, maybe not. It's
Hmm.
hard to tell,
That's what I'm
but it's
saying.
it's not pink. And I again, this I love it when we get birds that we don't 100% agree on. I also love it when, I mean, assuming that it is a golden crown sparrow, which I feel pretty confident it is. It's also an example of what's this bird strikes again, because that is a very good bird for the Texas coast, and
It's a good bird anywhere
hopefully,
west of Colorado,
yeah, pretty much
east of
any. You're
Colorado, I should say.
exactly right. Hopefully, some other people got out there to take a look for it. I haven't
I'd like
had
to
a
see some
chance
more
to check
photos.
up on that.
I'd like to
What's
see
that?
some more photos. I'd like to see some more photos
Yeah,
before I'm
yeah,
entirely convinced. I'm not saying it's
but
not. I just want to see more photos.
I'm surprised we haven't gotten a single comment about this bird in the
No one wants to
comments.
weigh in.
Usually people are chiming in a lot, going, "Yeah, no, Greg, you're full of it," or "Right on." It's like, no,
Yeah,
everybody's keeping quiet right now.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, this bird, Nate is not sure, thinking that it could be either. And if I'm characterizing this correct, Nate, you're leaning white crowned.
That's my yeah. But if another photo popped up and it looked more clearly golden crown to me, I would have no issue switching back over.
I
It's not like I'm firmly in the white crown camp.
I am leaning very
Nelson
hard
says you can see
golden
the
crowned.
yellow in the lore. I'm going to go find this bird on Facebook and I'm going to go have a look at it so I'm not looking at it through the Zoom on my laptop. That could
Gotcha.
also be part of it as well.
Gotcha. Um, Len Kopka says facial pattern, nape, and bill color clinch it for me, but he doesn't say clinch it as what.
Clinch it for what? Clinch it for what?
Yeah, clinch it. Um,
Yeah, clinch is
but
a funny
yeah,
thing.
I mean, as always with a single photo, this I
Single
really,
photo IDs are tough.
if I were on a records committee and I had to vote on this bird, I would vote on it being a golden crowned sparrow. However, as always with single photo, if there was another one that proved conclusively it wasn't, I wouldn't be, well, I would be a little surprised, but I wouldn't be 100% surprised, because single photos,
Notoriously difficult.
how many times have we been stomped on the foot by single photos?
Many times.
And Len now
Many.
says golden crowned. And
Okay.
cool.
Okay.
Um,
All right. I'll back down.
no backing down, man. It's um, so yeah. I mean, it's and it is, even when you get a good look at them. We've had a few here in Illinois. It's not straightforward, as you were saying earlier.
When I've seen golden crown sparrow, I've always been shocked by how similar they look, like a darker darker white crown sparrow a lot
Yeah,
of the time.
yeah, yeah. I
Especially
mean, you
the
really
younger
got to
ones.
look at them close to pick them out if you got one in a flock of white crowns.
Hmm. And funnily enough, like the white crowns tend to be paler the farther west you go.
Yeah,
The eastern ones are the darker ones. So Go figure. All right.
So now
Anyway,
we're
I think
going.
I
Now
think
we're
we have
going to.
consensus on this one.
Now we're going to Delaware, um, and we can't really see. You can't really see much on this bird, um,
No,
except a lot of
but
patterning.
yeah, I mean, I think we can safely say this is a hawk. This just says hawk to me.
That
Long wings, short tail, a lot of pattern in the tail, kind of blotchy brown all over. Um, I mean, I could maybe argue owl for this bird just because of what you see, but the head is smaller. Owls have big fluffy round heads that are
yeah,
roughly the same width as the shoulders. And so this says urban hawk to to me. Delaware looks awfully cold there, so winter hawk
yeah.
in Delaware. Um, yeah, what are our options?
I mean,
Um,
well, woodland hawk. As you said, it's got a short tail, so the wingtips are coming pretty close to the tip of the tail, so that rules out Cooper's hawk, or
yep,
sharp
yep.
shinned or anything like that. And yeah, look at the pattern on the tail and the wings that we can see. Uh, that really, I mean, that identifies the bird, I think, pretty darn quickly. So let's take a look. And
Yeah, for sure. They're both sort of similar. The thing that stands out to me when I see a red-shouldered hawk, or at least I should say, red-shouldered hawk is sort of my default neighborhood hawk. Where
right,
I live, I see them almost every single day. There's a pair flying over, screaming at me, even in the darkest, in the coldest part of winter. They're everywhere where I live. Broadwing hawk, less common. They breed sort of in the woody areas. They don't really like suburbia all that much. Um, and they're mostly gone in the winter too, so that's another point in favor of perhaps red-shouldered hawk. But whenever I see a broad-shouldered hawk perched, I'm struck by how plain they are. Like that is something that stands out to me more than just about anything. It's like those wings are plain. There's not much going on the wings.
right.
Pretty much all brown from wrist to tip.
Yep.
Whereas red-shouldered hawks have that really nice kind of black and white pattern, pretty prominent barring and banding when you see that thing, and the broadwings just don't have that.
Right, and we could see that the tail pattern, and the wing pattern combined. Really, there's a lot of black and white checkering, barring going on there.
Mm-hmm.
That broadwings just don't have. Broadwings got big, thick black terminal band with a thick white subterminal band.
Yeah.
But as you were pointing out, Nate, it's the secondaries are really a key ID feature across this bird's, almost across its entire plumage, in both species. And I've put little gray arrows on there to point out the secondaries, and you can see how on the and actually I got the arrow a little too high on the adult broadwing there. It should be down a little bit more, but you can see how the broadwing is, as you said, the wing panel is just pretty much dark from top to bottom. And in the red-shouldered, even the young birds have that checkering, that barring on the secondaries. And if you can see that, it's pretty much a slam dunk thing for that species. And
Yeah.
I think, and as Len says, you wouldn't see a broadwinged in Delaware in January, and I think you
That's
mentioned
what.
that also.
Yeah, I mean, the only place that you might encounter winter broadwings in the AVA area would be South Florida. I mean, I think they have
Yeah.
a handful of them, and not really all that many. This is a highly migratory species that spends pretty much all of the winter in Amazonia, and famously comes up or famously migrates in these massive flocks. That throughout the fall and sometimes in the spring too. Those
Yeah.
big kettles of birds that you see moving along Appalachia, at least where I live and elsewhere.
So I mean,
Red,
and
and
before
again,
I get to the
red-shouldered,
last,
common neighborhood hawk throughout.
all right, well, and
year-round
before
in
I
a
get
lot
to
of
the
parts
last,
of ABA area.
yeah, and before I get to the last little sort of field mark, it's interesting that where you live, red-shouldered is the default neighborhood hawk. Where I live, it's Cooper's hawk, but
We
the
get a few
second
Coopers, too. I had a Cooper's
I live,
plenty back
I
in
live
the
in a
day.
suburb immediately on the western edge of Chicago. I mean, if you're driving from downtown Chicago to where I live, you would never know that you left the city. And
Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, you've been there,
Yeah.
However, in the spring and summer, well, spring, summer, and fall, my second most common hawk is broadwing. and they're nesting around here somewhere, and there's 2 or 3 pair. And
Yeah,
I'm
I know. I've
sitting
driven from
outside
O'Hare
barbecuing
Airport
in
to
the
your
summer,
house,
and a
and there's
Buteo goes
some parks
over.
there that look broad-wingy.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
in the summertime, I'm outside, and there's a Buteo going over. 7 out of 10 times it's a broadwing. And that didn't used to be the case 20 years ago when we moved here. This has been something in the last 10 years that's happened, that we've got broadwings. And the last thing I'll say about this comp is I picked that juvenile red shoulder on purpose, because that's another thing to know about red-shouldered hawks. And you,
They're
I'm
loud.
sure, know, having them in your neighborhood, that
never shut
if you have a red-shouldered hawk in your neighborhood, it is damn sure going to let you know.
Yeah, they're hard to miss. Like, they are
They
the
don't shut up.
screamingest hawk in the ABA area, maybe the world.
I think
I
they
have
just
heard
sit around.
broadwings vocalize, but whenever I do, I'm like, hey, what is that? Because it's like this real loud, kind of piercing whistle.
It's like,
And yeah. Like,
Yeah.
What the hell is that? But yeah, red shoulders. How can you miss them? My goodness.
I mean, they just
annoying.
They just sit around and scream at the sky for the hell of it.
That's
Seriously.
exactly what they do. Yeah, especially when they have the chicks like right off the nest in like late May, early June.
And then you get 4 or 5 of them all screaming at each other,
going around screaming. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well,
Rachel Burns says Nashville seems to have equal numbers of red-tailed and Coopers. So you do get a lot of Cooper's hawks. I think Coopers are more common like in actual urban areas where they have things like pigeons and starlings and stuff to eat. I don't have too many pigeons in my neighborhood. I see Coopers from time to time, but I see red shoulders almost every day.
Yeah, so we've got a few minutes here, folks. If you guys have something you want to bring up, something you want to tell us about, now is the time.
We got a few minutes.
I can't read what's back there.
Have we talked about the ABA's bird of the year, Greg? Since this is our first, what's this bird for 2025?
Oh, good gravy. We haven't.
We have not.
Hang on just a second here.
Common loon, by the way. I don't know if y'all know common. I mean, who doesn't know who doesn't love a common loon? That's our bird of the year. We have a wonderful piece of art, magazines that just came out. I just got mine the other day. Birding magazine. It's by artist Sam Zimmerman.
Hang on here. I got
Minnesota artist, an Ojibwe artist. He does a lot of really cool stuff. There's a lot of cool patterns in the common loon here, including the Ojibwe constellation that has a common loon name, which I thought was very cool. You can learn more all about that. I interviewed him on a podcast episode, the first one of the year.
Yeah, hang on here. I've got a copy of the art here. Let me
I have it on my phone.
Get this back. I've got it. Let me see if I can.
Oh yeah.
This is going to be a little bit awkward now while I do this because
he's doing it on the fly.
I am. All right, that didn't show up the way it was supposed to. Trying to show you this piece of art here.
He misses the bird of the year reveal events. Yeah, we decided not to do that this year. I think that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, as they say, for those. So we decided to do it on the podcast.
Well, I am not sure why this picture is not showing
up.
Well, I know you're holding it up, but I have a nice high-res one here I was going to try to show everybody. And
go to the aba.org/bird of the year.
Just go to aba.org. It's right there at the tippy top. Absolutely.
It's our first water bird. Well, it's green heron might have been a water bird.
Green heron. And, of course, we would love to see you over at ABA Community, ABA members. And if you are not a member, please hit that join button and be part of the club. Great way to start off your birding year is to join the ABA. And help support the ABA American Birding Podcast, and you get our magazines and access to all kinds of fun stuff.
All sorts of stuff. Yeah, we'll be back in a couple weeks. Fingers crossed. Probably a couple weeks with more bird ID discussion. Greg and I will talk a little bit more before we come on, so we won't have any disagreements. Patty Elton has, is there a push of red poles coming down into Virginia or North Carolina this winter, possibly with the Arctic blast dipping so far south? I think the red poles are going to stay mostly in the boreal this year if the winter finch report from I forget, Matt Young and Tyler Hoare is to be believed. The push of those birds is less related to the temperature because red poles, as much as any bird, are well evolved to take advantage of very, very cold temperatures. Has less to do with the temperature and more to do with food source up in the boreal, up in the Canadian Shield. And so I think that their food, which are what do they like, willow and
birch
aspen and stuff like birch. We're doing very, very good this year. And
birch and alder.
So they'll mostly stay up north, along with most of the finches. I think a lot of the food crops, with the exception of some pines and north of the Great Lakes, are going to hold those birds up in the boreal this year. Although white-winged crossbills, we're kind of having a moment there early in the fall. Though I think
I was just going to mention that we had this little splurt of white-winged crossbills that I thought we might get a crossbill year.
Somewhere. Yeah.
And because I think Wisconsin had their highest single day total ever.
No, they had a huge
number.
And
then shortly after that, the Christmas count in Sax-Zim Bog had their highest count ever, I believe. And it seems that all those birds went east to west, and that movement it went horizontal and didn't come south.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was the area where Matt and Tyler had written that the cone crop wasn't great. Was that area just north of Wisconsin, north of Lake Superior, kind of up in there. But the rest of the cone crop looked really good. So, if you're a white-winged crossbill and you're thinking I got to go somewhere to find food, maybe the answer is to go west or to go east instead of to come south. So they're good at figuring that stuff out. Dave Betcher says no northern birds in St. Louis this year. Even red-breasted nuthatch is mostly missing. I think that was another
same
one
here in Chicago.
Stay up north. Yeah. I was looking. I had I was outside with my dog, watching nuthatches in the trees behind my house the other day, and I thought I might have had a red-breasted in with the brown-headeds, but I think it was just a really dark brown-headed. So I was listening for them.
And red-breasted nuthatch is another one, like red-shouldered hawk. If they're around, they'll let you know.
Yeah,
they don't shut up.
Hide themselves. Yeah. We do get them. I mean, they breed into the southern Appalachians and the high elevations, so we do have them there. And sometimes when we get them in the southeast, it's those birds kind of spilling out of the mountains a little bit, but not always, not every year.
Yeah,
I haven't seen any. I still need it for the county, so I get needs alerts if one pops up, and I haven't seen anything yet this year.
Cool. Gavin asks about the hen harrier on ADAC. We were talking about that before we
great bird.
Got on the air here. Yeah,
reported in the ABA area because it's practically identical to northern harrier, and the only reason they picked one of the reasons, not the only reason, obviously, that they picked them up on ADAC is because even northern harrier is quite rare up there, and so any harrier you're going to want to take a very, very close look at, and they did, and I forget, was it who was it that got all the photos that posted it? A lot of great photos of that bird, so it looks pretty well.
Yeah, it was Andy Bankert.
Andy Bankert, that's exactly right. Nice job by Andy.
Yeah, and they're doing winter on ADEC. This winter they've got 2 Eurasian sparrowhawks hanging out, and now a hen harrier. And
how much of that is that birders just don't hang around on ADEC into the winter?
Well,
that's a pretty miserable place to be this time of year, I would imagine. What do you get, like an hour and a half of daylight to go look for birds?
I don't know if it's quite that little, but the sun is really low and the birding is difficult, and the main reason that, at least traditionally, was to get whooper swans, which wintered there. But yeah, they're having a hell of a time on ADAC right now.
Yeah, for sure. Andrew Haffenden notes Alabama has a few broadwing hawks persisting into late December. It's a good point. That whole Gulf area that kind of moderates throughout the winter, never gets super cold. It doesn't surprise
Not
me.
next week, though.
No, the Broadwings are going to be feeling it next week. We all will.
Yeah, you're going to have iguanas dropping out of the trees in Florida and frozen snakes in Alabama.
Yeah.
Well, we just ticked over the 1 o'clock mark, so we
did it.
We did it again.
Check.
All right, you guys. Hey, hit that join button. Go to aba.org/join and join the club.
Subscribe to the
We
ABA
would love
podcast.
to have you. Yes, and also go on our homepage, and at the bottom there you can subscribe to our newsletter, Flight Calls, and find out about all the great stuff that we're doing and things coming up like this program and the podcast and everything else. So
absolutely, we'll see you next time, folks.
That does it for us.
Adios.
Adios.